Our everyday lives are filled with tiny coincidences that make us stop for a moment and wonder if there's more going on in the universe than we know about. Throughout history, there have been similar small coincidences, but there are also coincidences so great that they're almost unbelievable. Number 5. July 4th, 1776 is one of the most important days in American history. While the Declaration was officially agreed upon on July 1st, it was accepted by Congress on July 4th and signed months later. Despite this, July 4th is widely accepted as the date of American independence, and each year, millions of people gather to celebrate the occasion. What you'll never guess is that July 4th is also one of the deadliest days for US presidents, and behind the celebrations lies an eerie set of coincidences. On July 4th, 1826, America was set to celebrate its 50th anniversary and 50th year of being independent. The streets were abuzz with families lined up, waiting for the celebrations to begin. Regardless of where people sat on the political spectrum, they put their differences aside for one day to celebrate their independence and prosperity going forward as a nation. That was until news spread that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams had both passed away. The American public was in disbelief. How could two founding fathers pass away on the same day, and on July 4th of all days? Jefferson and Adams had both been unwell, and both of their passings were expected, but not on the same day, and surely not on the 50th anniversary. People quickly began pondering whether the two men had planned to hold off until July 4th before passing. A eulogy was written for Jefferson that read, quote, "The body had wasted away, but the energies of a powerful mind, struggling with expiring nature, kept the vital spark alive till the meridian sun shone on our 50th anniversary. Then content to pass, the illustrious Jefferson gave to the world his last declaration." This eulogy cemented the idea that willpower had kept both men alive, and once they had lived to see the 50th anniversary, they gave in to the inevitable. Conspiracy theories began popping up, and people claimed that someone had purposefully gotten rid of Jefferson and Adams on July 4th. Other people wondered whether two founding fathers passing away on the same day was more than a mere coincidence, but nothing further ever came of these theories. On July 4th, 1831, James Monroe, the 5th president, also passed away following a bout of illness. Newspapers were quick to jump on the connection to Jefferson and Adams, and sparked further debates about the eerie coincidence surrounding July 4th and presidents of the United States. The Town Herald of Maryland wrote, quote, "This have 3 of our revolutionary presidents departed this life on the anniversary of our independence, presenting the most remarkable tissue of coincidences that have marked the history of nations." Number 4. The case of Walter Summerford is perhaps one of the weirdest stories in history. Summerford served as a British Army officer in World War I. He saw numerous battles, defeats, and other horrors, but it wouldn't be his wartime experience that would put him in the history books. In 1918, Summerford was stationed in Belgium with his men. In their minds, they were gearing up to avoid the enemy and make it across the vast openness to their target. Summerford jumped onto his horse and rode into battle. As soldiers around him were struck down, something very different happened to Summerford. As he was riding his horse, a bolt of lightning struck him, throwing him off his horse and onto the ground. Luckily, Summerford survived, but became wheelchair-bound after the incident had left him paralyzed. They say that lightning never strikes twice, but Summerford was about to find out that was a lie. In 1924, many years after World War I, Summerford had moved to Canada in hopes of starting afresh. He took to outdoor sports and even set about making a family of his own. One day, he was sitting underneath a tree, peacefully fishing, when another bolt of lightning hit. It didn't hit him directly, but struck the tree, and the current was absorbed through his body. As previously mentioned, Summerford lost the use of his legs following the first lightning strike. But the second time around, the lightning strike almost appeared to help him. Just days after the second lightning strike, Summerford stunned doctors and was able to walk again. It has never been determined whether this is just a bizarre coincidence, or whether the lightning strike really did help him. Lightning would strike Summerford for a third and final time in 1930, when he was on his daily walk around a local park. As the skies filled with dark clouds and the sound of thunder echoed through the air, Summerford knew that something was about to happen. Knowing that third time's a charm, Summerford ran as fast as he could, but was once again struck down by lightning. This time, he wasn't so lucky, and the incident left him fully paralyzed. 2 years later, he passed away as a result of his condition. Even after his passing, Summerford couldn't escape lightning. He'd been buried in the Mountain View Cemetery in Vancouver, British Columbia, and his family tended to his grave and headstone regularly. In 1936, 4 years after he passed away, his headstone was struck by lightning, causing it to fragment into many pieces. Summerford's family lived the rest of their days believing that he had been cursed. Number 3. Robert Todd Lincoln, the eldest child of Abraham and Mary Lincoln, was the only child to reach adulthood, and his parents, especially his mother, kept a tight grip on him to ensure that he was safe. At 17 years old, Robert enrolled himself at Harvard University, much to his parents' delight. Shortly after starting the university, the American Civil War broke out, and Robert was keen to enlist and join the cause. Unfortunately for Robert, his mother, Mary, wasn't on the same page and forbade him from signing up. This was a source of great embarrassment for Abraham, but not wanting to push matters further, allowed his son to continue with his studies. Robert continued to attend Harvard University despite the Civil War raging across the US. One day, Robert decided that it was time to take a break from his studies and hopped on a train back to Washington. What happened next is one of the most eerie coincidences in modern history, and is often an overlooked story when talking about the Booth family. Robert had departed the train at Jersey City, but found that the platform was teeming with passengers. In a bizarre twist of fate, Edwin Booth, the older brother of John Wilkes Booth, just so happened to be at the Jersey City train station too. Little did these two men know that their lives and families would become infamously entangled for all the wrong reasons. In a 1909 letter, Robert described the incident and how Edwin Booth saved his life. A funny coincidence considering that years earlier, Edwin's older brother, John, would go on to take the life of Robert's father, Abraham Lincoln. On the night that Abraham Lincoln passed, Robert was supposed to attend Ford's Theater to watch Our American Cousin with his parents, Abraham and Mary, but declined the offer at the last minute. Little did he know that this would be the last night that his father would come face to face with John Wilkes Booth, the younger brother of the man who had saved him months earlier. Number 2. In 1940, 2 twin boys were put up for adoption and were subsequently adopted by 2 separate families. The first boy, James Jim Lewis, went to live with the Lewises in Lima, Ohio. By all accounts, Jim Lewis was a happy child. He had a dog called Toy and excelled at math and carpentry. Jim Lewis's first marriage was to a woman called Linda, but sadly the marriage didn't last. Following their divorce, Jim Lewis married a woman named Betty and had a son, who he named James Allen Lewis. When Jim Lewis wasn't working hard as a security guard, he spent his time with his family and took them on several vacations to Florida. Friends and family recall that Jim Lewis drove a Chevrolet and chain-smoked heavily. Jim Lewis knew that he had a twin brother out there, but didn't know how to track him. His adoptive parents had little information about his brother, so he decided to reach out to the courts of Ohio. Jim Lewis searched through birth and adoption records, and in 1977, he found his twin brother, James Jim Springer. 2 years later, in 1979, the two brothers agreed to meet up and reconnect. The reunion was a tearful one, and as the brothers got to know each other, they discovered that they shared more than DNA. The second boy, James Jim Springer, had been adopted by the Springer family, who lived in Ohio just 40 miles away from where Jim Lewis had grown up. The more they chatted, the crazier the coincidences became. Both brothers were affectionately named Jim, after their birth parents had named them James. They had both married a woman named Linda, whom they had divorced. They had both remarried to a woman named Betty, and had named their sons James Allen. Both twins had a childhood dog named Toy. They both excelled at math and carpentry, and both were heavy smokers and drove a Chevrolet. According to the Minnesota Center for Twin and Family Research, both Jims also had an adopted brother named Larry. Both had law enforcement training or backgrounds, and this report also details how at 18 years old, the twins mysteriously developed tension headaches, gained the same amount of weight during this period, and both stood at 6 foot and 180 pounds. In a bizarre twist, the two Jims even took their respective families to the same Florida beach for their summer holidays, completely unaware that their twin brother could be standing just meters from them. When this story hit the headlines, scientists were baffled and set up a study to see if they could understand this phenomenon. These two twins had been raised separately, but had somehow inadvertently lived the same lives. Number 1. The sinking of the Titanic is one of the most well-known maritime disasters in human history. Countless books, documentaries, and films have been made about the event, and even 100 years on, people are still talking about that fateful day. What most people don't know is that there are two books that were written before 1912 that eerily predicted the sinking of the Titanic. The most notable book is The Wreck of the Titan, written by Morgan Robertson in 1898. Robertson's book follows the story of a ship named Titan that is touted as being unsinkable and boasts being the largest ship of its kind at the time. Robertson also includes another key detail, and that is that the Titan is carrying very few lifeboats, a detail that later emerged during the sinking of the Titanic. Much like the Titanic, the Titan hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic, setting in motion a chaotic chain of events that leads to the ship sinking. There are other bizarre similarities between the Titanic and the Titan. The Titanic was 882 feet long, and the Titan was described as being 800 feet long. The Titan traveled at 25 knots when it hit the iceberg, and the Titanic was traveling at 22.5. Both ships could also hold 3,000 passengers, and as previously mentioned, neither ship had enough lifeboats for everyone on board. They were both British ships, and both incidents, both real and fictional, happened around midnight off the coast of Newfoundland. In 1912, when the news of the Titanic broke, everyone began calling Robertson psychic, which made some people wary of him. Robertson hit back at these claims by saying, quote, "I know what I'm writing about, that's all." He also claimed to have spent years researching shipbuilding, which helped him write his book. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.